So, this is a presentation on single parenthood and how it relates to social work by Brianna Cochran, Kelly Evelyn, myself, and Hannah Wilson. And here's a little background on what single parenthood is. A single parent is an uncoupled individual who shoulders most or all the day to day responsibilities for raising a child or multiple children. Some can be a single parent through a variety of circumstances. This could be due to death of a partner, divorce, adoption, and simply by choice. Regardless of the reasons why someone is a single parent, this topic can greatly impact the quality of one's life into adulthood. Here's some statistics about single parenthood, just to give you guys an idea of the significance behind it. 84% of single parent families are mothers. 49% of these have never married. 23.2% of the couples are jobless the entire year. $26,000 a year is a median income for single mothers. 39.6% were food insecure. 45.8% of these single mothers have received food stamps at some point, and 22% have had no health insurance. In the environment, single parenthood can play a huge role. Families that have single parent households usually come from being brought up by a single parent themselves or because of the environment they live in. The environment can play a huge role in this due to children being very observant learners. When children are young, they tend to watch the behaviors around them, and that becomes their new normal because that's all they know, and they're growing and learning, so that's what they think is normal to them and what is supposed to happen, so that can play in later when they become parents themselves. Most of the single parenting comes from women since they're most likely to raise kids on their own. This could possibly be because women usually have those nurturing motherly instincts, and so they tend to be less likely to leave their child rather than a man. When living in a single parent household, they experience behavioral, social, emotional, and academic problems, and this can just be due to a lot of stress that comes from living in a household like that. Single parenting does have different effects on different people, such as race and economic status. In lower income families, mother-only families are more likely to be poor due to the lower earning capacity of women, which would be the wage gap that men make significantly more than women do. Inadequate public assistance and child care subsidies, lack of enforced child support from non-residential fathers all lead into why single-parent families are most likely headed by mothers. White mothers who live in poverty are most likely to have been married at some point, and their current status is from divorce, separation, or death of a spouse. And African American mothers who live in poverty have most likely had their children out of wedlock. Financial strain is a huge predictor in depression in single parents, and it can cause depression for many reasons, considering that life is usually based upon money, and what you can do and provide for your child is centered around money. And so the lack of this can put a lot more stress on a family that rather than one that has a lot of money to fund their family. Higher levels of depression is predictive of more punitive disciplinary practices and decreased parental nutrients, support, and satisfaction with the parenting role. Children growing out of wedlock and have trouble keeping jobs as young adults, being in the lower class, and having lower income effects of the child and parent negatively creates problems within the home and outside of the home. In reference to race, African American women, it's more common for them to be single parents, mostly because of the stereotype they get from using government or public assistance for things such as food stamps and money. In the US, white women are more likely to be single parents since they got divorced or um, the environment that they grow up in. There's a reason for the difference between these, and it's because it's believed that African American women show a much higher rate of the single pregnancy because of the environment they grow up in, which would be lower income housing. And white families are less subject to being a single parent because most of them are usually middle or high class. Since 1960, the percentage of white children living in single parent homes has increased from 7 to 23%. Single parenthood is prevalent in teens for various reasons. These can include lack of sexual education, low income, not being ready to have a child and having one, and also having children out of wedlock. From 1970 until now, single family household rates have nearly doubled. These rates could also be linked to the rising divorce rate. Um, Nearly 330,000 teens between the ages of 15 and 19 get pregnant each year, according to the CDC. Around 50% of these teens who have these babies so young claim that they have not used any form of birth control. Factors that make the likelihood of becoming a teen mom are if the child's mother is a teen mom. And like I had stated earlier, children are very observant, and if they see their mom raising them on their own, they will think that that's normal and tend to grow up in the same way. Um, if his or her mother, did not complete high school, if she was raised by a single parent, and if her parents were not married when she was conceived. Um, Being a teen mom doesn't directly cause single parenthood, although it increases the chances of it. Um, and like I said, being a teen parent can have an influence on a child becoming a teen parent. Um, Although being a teen mom does increase your likelihood of becoming impoverished. Unprepared pregnancy also leads into becoming a single parent. Having an accidental child at a young age is linked to single parenthood. Occasionally, the fathers or mothers cannot cope with having that form of responsibility and leave. This could be a major setback. When you have a child unplanned, there are so many things you have to worry about, such as adequate resources, who's going to watch the child, what are you and the other parent going to do in regards of school, living, money, etc. There's a whole list of things in planning that must be figured out within a 9-month time frame, and anyone who's unready for that definitely has to consider those consequences. Um, when this occurs, it can form a cycle from becoming a single parent, becoming impoverished, struggling, the baby growing up with inadequate resources, and then the child having to deal with those negative factors and also find their way. Low-income families yield higher rates of single parenthood than families with medium or high incomes. Having lower income affects the parent's ability to be present due to possibly having to work insane schedules. Um, this could pose as a lack of conversation between the parent and the child. Um, they could miss out on conversations about our bodies as women, our menstrual cycle, ovulation periods, birth control, other things of that. And they could become pregnant later in time due to that lack of communication. Um, Also, without a parent being present often, it can lead to extreme amounts of freedom for the child, and that will leave the teen time to do whatever they want whenever they would like to. Close to 4 million children are living in single parent houses, which are below the poverty line. Um, in low income families, they have less access to birth control, adequate education, and in schools, a lot of time they give good classes on our bodies, contraceptive use, and things like that. And if that education is lacking, they won't know. And if you're a teen and making that mature decision to be sexually active, you should protect yourself with birth control, and if not, your chances of becoming pregnant highly increase. The poverty rate for single mother families in 2013 was 39.6%, and it's nearly 5 times the rate of 7.6% for married couple families. Through some research, it is found that there is no direct group of people who are more likely to become single parents. There are various factors that feed into it ending up that way. Some life circumstances may lead to that, and from the information we found, those things include teen pregnancy, having children out of wedlock, becoming impoverished, lacking education, and so much more. Becoming a single parent is more of a circumstantial event.
Impact of single parenthood on adults later in life. 25% of youths from divorced families in comparison to 10% from non-divorced families did have serious social, emotional, or psychological problems. Children who were raised in single-parent homes are more likely to grow up with mental health issues and substance dependence. Single parenthood does not only affect the parents who are raising a child by themselves, it also deeply affects the child. The impact of being raised by one parent can affect someone into adulthood, with issues like substance abuse or mental illness. This does not mean that everyone who has been raised by a single parent will encounter these issues, but these individuals who are statistically more likely. Impact of single parenthood on adults later in life. Boys are significantly more likely to end up in jail or prison by the time they turn 30 if they are raised by a single mother. Mass incarceration is also causing single parenthood because fathers are being taken away from their children. It is important to be aware of these issues, this issue that individuals who are raised by single mothers are more likely to go to prison because it really demonstrates how a child does need two supportive figures in their life. Clearly, going to prison can drastically impact someone's life, so this is another example of the effect single parenthood can have on adults if they were raised in that environment. Impact of single parenthood on adults later in life. About 1/3 of girls whose fathers left the home before they turned 6 ended up pregnant as teenagers, compared with just 5% of girls whose fathers were there throughout their childhood. Single parenthood also affects women later in life. Just like the cycle of incarceration in men, there's a cycle of teen pregnancy in women. If a girl was raised by a single mother, that is the lifestyle she knows and is used to, so it is easier for her to fall into the cycle of also becoming a pregnant teen like her mother was. As demonstrated in this presentation, being a teenage mother can cause a lot of problems like poverty, so it is important to try to get people out of the cycle. For us as social workers, understanding this cycle can be vital when working with teenage girls who come from single-parent households. Impact of single parenthood on adults later in life. Being raised in a single-parent home impacts educational achievement. Children raised in single-parent homes are at an educational disadvantage compared to their peers raised with both parents in their home. The graph shows that less people from single-parent families are completing college, which limits their abilities in terms of employment. Typically, single-parent households are lower in terms of socioeconomic class, and the educational deficit for children raised in that environment could potentially continue the cycle of poverty. Without a degree in today's society, it can be incredibly difficult to earn a high-paying job, so lower college completion rates indicates that adults who are raised by a single parent are at a disadvantage in terms of employment. Impacts of single parenthood on adults later in life. Young adults aged 18 to 24 are more likely to commit suicide if they were raised in a single-parent household. There are also high rates of comorbidity of mental illness, generalized anxiety, and depression. The psychological impact of being raised in a single-parent household can potentially be devastating. A study done by Wunderlich, Bornish, and Ritchen analyzed the comorbidity of mental illness and suicide attempts and compared them to different environment factors, like being raised by a single parent. They found that suicide attempt rates were higher for those in a single-parent household. What this means for us as social workers is that we really need to take special care when working with individuals who come from a background like this, because there are so many differences that can be compared to being raised with both parents that we may not think of when practicing. If we have clients who grew up in this kind of environment, we should make sure to explore with them how their life has been affected by being raised by a single parent, and we should try to address the various cycles related to single parenthood in order to prevent the cycle from continuing. Again, this is not to demean anyone who is raised in a single parent household, because your environment is not the sole factor in determining who you are, and not everyone who grows up with one parent will go to prison or have a child as a teen or not finish college. But it's important to recognize and address these differences in likelihood for success and do what we can to advocate for those who are growing up in this kind of environment in order to help them once. The U.S. versus other countries. Developed countries in particular are experiencing an increase in single-parent families as divorce becomes more common. The United States has the highest percentage of single-parent families, 34% in 1998, among developed countries, followed by Canada at 22%, Australia at 20%, and Denmark at 19%. The United States has one of the highest rates of teen pregnancy in the world, with 53 births per 1,000 women aged 19 and younger. Compared to countries at the lower end of the spectrum, such as Denmark, 9 births per 1,000, Netherlands at 6 births per 1,000, and Japan at 4 births per 1,000. Worldwide, adolescents give birth to over 14 million children annually. Originally, I assumed the rate of single-parent families would have been higher within developing countries, and not developed countries like America, Canada, and Australia. And when I read this, my eyes opened a little bit more about not only my home, but other countries. I chose this quote for teen pregnancy because I believe it accurately shows the difference between birth rates in America and other countries. It surprised me to see the rate of teenage births within America, and compared to other countries, our rate is staggering. I knew teenage pregnancy was on the rise, but I could never have imagined that worldwide 14 million children are born annually to adolescents. Socioeconomic class. Increase in single parenthood has been seen within a specific group. Since 1990, there has been an increase in white teens having children. Now this population takes up about 2/3 total of teen mothers within the United States. I could not find the specific demographics to see economically where the increase is. I did find that one of the contributing factors to teen pregnancy was a lack of contact and relationship with parents. And then to speak about minority women, it cannot be ignored, however, that the category of single parents has included an increasing number of never married, poor minority women struggling to raise 2 or more children as they are pressured to move from welfare to work. This quote to me speaks for itself. It surprises me that this population was never married, but within today's society, one could begin to understand. The rate of births of single mothers by diversity. The percentage of births to single women varies across race. In 1995, 20% of all births to Asian and Pacific Islanders were to single women, compared to 25% for white women, 41% for women of Hispanic origin, 57% for Native American, Eskimo, and Aleut women, and 70% for African American families. I chose this statistic because it showed a vast variation in ethnicity and their rate of birth. I found this interesting because I felt it went into depth and included a good range of populations. It surprised me to see once again the percentage to be so low for white women. I assumed their rate would have been higher, and for instance, Native American and Eskimo to be lower. Female versus male. Research shows more single parents are female. Globally, 1/4 to 1/3 of all families are headed by single mothers, calling into question the normativeness of couple-headed families. It didn't surprise me within this quote that I had found that more families are headed by females because in society standards, especially in the U.S., we expect women to actually take better care of children than men. You see more caretakers being female, you see more teachers being female, more of the caring and nurturing roles you have through history and recently seen to be women. In court cases, it is actually common for many judges to rule towards women during divorce cases because it is once again assumed that women have better chances and a higher rate of producing a well-formed and well-raised child, even though there are plenty of statistics to counteract that. All of this information that we have talked about up until now is vital for social workers because single family are a very vast and wide population within social work. They make up, especially with the rate of divorce heightening in today's day and age, they make up a very large group that we will have to work with. And this is all necessary information because in order for us to give proper care and to work with the individual in a manner that's going to produce the best results, we need to know about their background, their socioeconomic background, and the way that they were raised, because the way an individual is raised greatly will influence the way that the individual becomes once entering adulthood.
So, in conclusion to how single parenthood relates to social work, with the rise of this population growing, we can find these type of people in the mental health field, child welfare field, domestic violence, things of that nature. And so, expanding our knowledge on this will help us have more of an insight on single parenthood, which can help us help more people in the future because unknowingly, this could be the root of a problem that has gotten more severe over time. So, knowing a lot about single parenthood is very important to social work.